Have you ever stopped to think about your body's motor system? It's literally like a grand symphony. Every single tiny muscle contraction, every slight shift in your balance, every gesture you make, it's all a perfectly timed musical note. And today, we are going to reverse engineer exactly how your brain and body conduct this incredible symphony, making the super complex science of human movement actually intuitive and, well, pretty fun to grasp.
Our story actually kicks off with a brilliant guy named Sir Charles Scott Sherrington. He bagged a Nobel Prize back in 1932 for essentially discovering the hardware and the autopilot of our muscles. He figured out the sensory and motor innervation of skeletal muscles and mapped out our spinal reflexes. Basically, he wrote the foundational manual on how our brains talk to our bodies.
So, we're going to break down how movement happens in 5 parts. First, the blueprint of movement. Second, our sensors for length and tension. Third, the body's autopilot reflexes. Fourth, the cerebellum for balance and timing. And finally, the basal ganglia, which act as your body's gas and brakes.
Let's jump right into part 1, the blueprint of movement.
To begin our symphony, we really need to understand the fundamental architecture of how the brain issues commands to the rest of the body. Think of the hierarchy of movement kind of like a massive corporation. At the very top, you've got the CEO. That's your association cortex and basal ganglia, figuring out the drive, strategy, and overall design of what you actually want to do. Next, that strategy gets handed down to the middle managers, the primary motor cortex and cerebellum. They write the specific code and program the actual movement. Finally, that program hits the execution level, your brainstem, spinal cord, and motor neurons. They do the heavy lifting of managing your posture and performing those goal-directed movements using your striated muscles.
When we look at a cross-section of the spinal cord, that final execution pathway, you'll notice a massive difference between the outer white matter, which acts like a busy highway carrying signals up and down, and the inner, butterfly-shaped gray matter. Specifically, if you look at the bottom part of that gray matter called the ventral or anterior horn, that's where the motor neurons live. They act as the ultimate, final messengers that directly wire your nervous system right into your muscles. Moving on to section 2, sensors. Let's talk about length and tension.
Now, before your brain can even think about moving a muscle, it desperately needs real-time data, and it gets this from a really cool binary sensory system. On one side, we have the muscle spindle. Picture this as a tiny rubber band lying parallel inside the main muscle fibers. It strictly measures muscle length, so if the muscle stretches, boom, it fires off a signal. On the other side, we have the Golgi tendon organ. This sits in series with the muscle, right at the tendon, acting like a highly sensitive spring that measures pure tension. If you squeeze or pull the muscle hard, it feels that tension and reports right back. So remember, spindles for length, Golgi for tension.
But wait, there's a bit of a mechanical problem here. If your main muscle contracts and gets shorter, wouldn't that internal rubber band muscle spindle just go totally slack and stop working? The body solves this with a brilliant servo assist function. Gamma motor neurons step in to stimulate the ends of the spindle, actively pulling them tight even as the main muscle shrinks. This ensures your length sensors are constantly taut and ready to fire no matter what crazy position your arm or leg is currently in.
That brings us to section 3, the body's autopilot reflexes.
Let's see how all this hardware translates into real-world action when those sensors trigger automatic, super-fast movements. Imagine someone suddenly drops a massive stack of textbooks right onto your outstretched hands. Instantly, the stretch reflex or myotatic reflex kicks in. The sudden weight stretches your bicep. Your muscle spindles fire off a signal telling the spinal cord, hey, we're being pulled. And the spinal cord shoots a message right back to flex the bicep and hold that weight. But what if those books are just ridiculously, dangerously heavy? Well, then your Golgi tendon organs sense that massive tension. They trigger the inverse myotatic reflex, totally overriding the flex. It literally forces your muscle to relax so you drop the books before your tendon snaps. It's a literal built-in safety switch.
Up next is section 4, the cerebellum, which handles your balance and timing.
This part of the brain is essentially your masterful co-pilot. It keeps us upright, coordinated, and perfectly on time. Your cerebellum is neatly divided into 3 specialized departments. First, the vestibulocerebellum. This handles your basic posture, eye movements, and balance. Second, the spinocerebellum. Think of this as a real-time spell checker. It compares the movement you wanted to make with what your body is actually doing and fixes muscle tone on the fly. Third, the cerebrocerebellum. This department works directly with your cortex to plan movements, manage exact timing, and handle really complex motor learning, like learning how to type fast or play a sonata on the piano.
Hey, have you ever wondered what motion sickness actually is? Proper balance requires your cerebellum to flawlessly integrate what you see with what your inner ear, your vestibular system, physically feels. Motion sickness is basically your brain throwing a giant 404 error because your eyes and your inner ear are sending completely conflicting signals to your vestibulocerebellum. You might see a stationary room inside a boat cabin, but your inner ear is definitely feeling the rocking of the ocean.
We really only grasp how immensely powerful the cerebellum is when something goes wrong with it. A patient might develop Charcot's triad, which involves nystagmus, or twitching eyes, an intention tremor, meaning they shake specifically when reaching for something, and stuttering telegraphic speech. They might suffer from ataxia, which is severely awkward movement, or dysmetria, meaning they completely lose the ability to judge distances, failing a really simple finger-to-nose test. And here's a crucial point. Unlike damage to the main motor cortex, these cerebellum symptoms show up on the exact same side of the body as the brain damage, which we call being ipsilateral.
And finally, Section 5, the basal ganglia, your brain's gas and brakes. We've officially reached the deep engine room of the brain. This is what ultimately decides whether a voluntary movement should actually happen or be actively suppressed. Nestled way down deep within the cerebral hemispheres is this incredible cluster of structures. You've got the striatum, made up of the caudate and putamen, acting as the main input station. Then there's the globus pallidus, the subthalamic nucleus, and the substantia nigra. Together, these structures act as the ultimate bouncer at the club. Your cortex might have a fantastic idea for a movement, but the basal ganglia absolutely has to sign off on it before that signal goes through the thalamus and down to the spine.
This right here is where the absolute magic of movement control happens. You've got two major opposing pathways working together. The direct pathway uses an excitatory neurotransmitter called glutamate. Think of this as your body's gas pedal. It literally stimulates movement. Then you have the indirect pathway, which relies on the inhibitory neurotransmitter, GABA. This is your body's brake pedal, constantly suppressing unwanted movements. And the kicker? Dopamine from the substantia nigra acts like the crucial oil that fine-tunes both of these pathways at the exact same time.
As you can guess, balance is absolutely everything here. If this delicate neurochemical dance gets thrown off, we see profound movement disorders. If the direct pathway, the gas pedal, fails, usually due to a lack of dopamine, a person suffers from a severe poverty of movement, struggling to just initiate an action. That's the hallmark of Parkinson's disease. On the flip side, if the indirect pathway, the brakes, fails, the person suffers from uncontrollable involuntary sweeping movements, which is what we see in Huntington's disease.
When you realize that your brain and body orchestrate this breathtaking symphony of physics, chemistry, and electricity every single second of your life, just to help you pour a simple cup of morning coffee or walk across a room, it's mind-blowing. It really leaves you wondering, what amazing physical feat is your incredible body truly capable of that you haven't even asked it to do yet? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today. I hope you found our motor system just as awe-inspiring as I do.